Greetings and welcome to another Patch Notes video here at Words About Games, a weekly video series that lets us host discussions and post opinion pieces about our various thoughts on games, gaming, and the industry. Today it's time for another list. E3 is done and gone. I watched 10 presentations, press conferences, and whatever you want to call Devolver Digital's short film masterpiece. I checked out gameplay demos and interviews for over 60 games, and now I'm compiling all of that into a top 16 list to tell you about all the awesome stuff you probably already know about, but hopefully also surprise you with a couple of things, as well as just give you a glimpse into where my head's at in regards to all the awesome games I saw at this year's E3. If you like this video, be sure to check out this week's podcast episode, which saw Keith and I review the different presentations and give out some E3 awards. But enough preamble, let's dive into the list. Despite the fact that my friend and sometime co-host Patrick has been desperately calling for a Western release / remake of Seiken Densetsu 3 pretty much the entire time I've known him, I knew very little about it, or the Mana series in general. The remake of Secret of Mana passed me by last year, and heck, I didn't even know Seiken Densetsu 3 was Trials of Mana until Patrick's adorable freak out in my Twitch chat when the Mana collection was announced. Naturally, this made me curious to keep an eye on the full-on remake that was announced as part of the Nintendo Direct this year, and I got to see some extended gameplay of both the original and the remake, and I have to say I'm really interested in what I saw. If you've been following me for a while, you've probably noticed that I've got a soft spot for a good JRPG, and Trials of Mana looks like a fun, chilled-out action RPG. I'm really intrigued by the party select system, which sees you pick a main character and 2 supporting characters from a pool of 6 at the start of the game, and get locked into those choices for the duration, with different party combinations affecting the story in different ways. I was a big fan of Planet Coaster, which felt more like a spiritual successor to Theme Park than necessarily just a roller coaster simulator. So to see Planet Zoo pop up to both the PC gaming show and the Twitch E3 streams was exciting. I probably could have done without seeing the trailer after every single interview on Twitch though. First and foremost, Planet Zoo looks utterly charming, which is probably to be expected when you're talking about a game where you look after all the cute animals. And with Frontier Developments at the helm, I'm supremely confident that Planet Zoo will be just as engaging and engrossing as Planet Coaster was when it first launched over 2 years ago. But the thing I think is really cool about Planet Zoo, other than its November 2019 release date, is that Frontier are building a game to be educational as much as just an addictive zoo simulator. All of the animals you'll be taking care of will require their own habitats, with different structures and structured environments, as well as have their own diets and their own special care needs. Aside from this sounding like the basis for an engrossing set of deep gameplay mechanics, it's pretty cool that Planet Zoo will be able to teach me a few things about the animals that it places in my care. I've been a fan of Tokyo RPG Factory since its inception, thanks to its remit to create old-school JRPGs for the modern age. And while their games haven't exactly set the world on fire, they've scratched an itch that usually only gets satisfied by playing older games, so I'm really thankful they're around and dedicated to giving me new takes on classic adventures. Anunnaki is a bit of a departure for the studio, ditching the sedate, turn-based nature of its last 2 games for a more immediate action style. The art style is quite a bit bolder as well, making Anunnaki stand out from its predecessors. On top of all that, the story sounds really interesting. Tokyo RPG Factory have dabbled in somber, melancholy tales before, but Anunnaki presents a very literal tale of life and death. You play as a Watcher, someone who's charged with ferrying lost souls from the living world to the afterlife. The potential for the story to be heartwarming, heartbreaking, or both is baked into the premise by design. Lastly, the creative producer on Anunnaki is Takahashi Takita, who served as director on Chrono Trigger and Parasite Eve, and was the lead game designer on Final Fantasy IV, which definitely piques my interest if nothing else. Thankfully, I won't have to wait too long before I sink my teeth into it, as the game is coming out on August 22nd. Normally when I sit down to make lists like this, I have a rule. I need to see a meaningful amount of gameplay to go along with whatever trailer is shown at whatever press conference. It's just how I am. In a world where just about anything can look cool in a cinematic or highly choreographed trailer, I try to reserve my highest levels of excitement for games I see being played. I'm not trying to be snobby, it's just the way I am. I mention this because I didn't see much more of 12 minutes than what was shown at Microsoft's press conference, and I also didn't need to see much more to be convinced that this could be something special. For those that didn't see the intense trailer, 12 minutes traps you in a time loop. In 12 minutes, a man claiming to be a police officer is going to knock at the door, hurt the protagonist and his wife, and claim that she killed her father. You've got to figure out a way out of the situation, slowly piecing together the story of what happened to the wife's father, exploring the suffocatingly claustrophobic confines of the apartment the game takes place in, and learning what does and doesn't work in a bid to try and keep yourself safe, all while repeating the same 12 minutes over and over. I feel like to see much more than what we've already been shown risks blunting the experience when the game comes, so I'd rather know as little as possible, other than that I can't wait for 12 minutes when it drops sometime next year. I've been kind of sleeping on Ancestors since its reveal, which I can't actually remember. Even during its spot at the PC gaming show, it kind of passed me by. Instead of focusing on the game, I engaged Twitch chat in a discussion on what constituted a primate thanks to an on-screen poll, which I guess speaks to the perils of trying to take these shows in while simultaneously engaging an audience, but I'd rather not have it any other way. It was only during the E3 livestreams later that I actually got what kind of experience Ancestors and its creator Patrice Désilets was trying to show. Look, it's a survival game, and I can count on one hand the number of survival games I've actually enjoyed. I'm hopeful it won't have overly intrusive survival meters constantly pulling me away from actually enjoying the experience, because seeing the gameplay footage of Ancestors, getting partially lost in the beauty of the Neo-Geo African world it seeks to create, and the incredibly immersive audio design appeals to me greatly. I saw the player character, a primate, climbing trees, exploring caves, bounding through the jungle, and more, and I was captivated. Gameplay and story aside, Ancestors was presented to me as a world I wanted to get lost in. At E3, it went from a game I just barely knew existed to a game I'm incredibly eager to explore when it comes out this August. EA kicked things off with their Totally Not an E3 event by showing us a deep dive into Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, with Vince Zampella and Stig Asmussen on hand to avoid getting into any specifics about the game, despite the probing questions of panel host Greg Miller. At first, I wondered if a full half hour might be stretching things a bit too long, but by the end, I remember looking over at Keith during our live stream in disbelief that our 30 minutes was up. It went by in a flash thanks to the charisma of the developers and how sold I was on the excellent gameplay we had just witnessed. What we saw looks like a little bit of Jedi Knight, the secret best Star Wars game, a little bit of Uncharted, and a little bit of God of War, mixed in with some of the hallmarks of a Respawn Entertainment game. Don't think I didn't see that wall running. Combined with the badass story trailer from the Star Wars experience, it was enough to whet my appetite for the November release date. But Stig and Vince did me one better, talking about the game taking you to several different hub-like worlds that'll feature light Metroidvania-like elements, areas you'll be able to come back to and reach when you've unlocked the appropriate force powers. Keith said it best when he gave Jedi his Best Game award. Is it November yet? Sometimes games don't need to be anything other than fun. Fun is considered something of a dirty word in games critique, and I do sometimes try to stay away from using it whenever possible, because fun is subjective, and what's fun for me isn't fun for someone else. But not all games need to have deep narratives or intricate game design. Sometimes it's cool if a game is just something you can pick up and have a blast with, and Luigi's third outing as a Ghostbuster, proving yet again that he's a cooler protagonist than his attention-hogging brother, certainly looks like it fits the bill. The world's most adorable Ghostbuster accepts an invitation to a hotel with some of his friends, and naturally it all goes a bit wrong and he needs to rescue his buddies while battling the ghosts that stand in his way. It seems a fairly simple game, progressing from room to room utilizing Luigi's ghost vacuum to dispatch spectres, fighting the occasional boss, solving the occasional puzzle, and collecting the occasional collectible. Pretty much all I need Luigi's Mansion 3 to be, and that's pretty much what it looks like it'll deliver, so I'm looking forward to getting my hands on it sometime later this year. I really loved Fallout 3. I loved exploring the world of the Capital Wasteland, diving into every location, and just soaking in the atmosphere of the retro-themed post-apocalypse. I loved that aspect of the game so much, I was able to ignore the clunky shooting and kind of stupid story and consequence system. And while I can't speak to how the Outer Worlds feels to play, I'm really digging the feel of the worlds that Obsidian are creating and the focus on having choices that make sense and consequences that actually matter. Part of this is from what I've seen of the game so far, particularly from this year's E3. The devs are talking a big game about how their narrative works. Part of this is because the game is being in part developed by the creators of Fallout. Not the third one, but the first two. Now, full disclosure time, I've never played Fallout or Fallout 2, so I don't have first-hand knowledge of those games. But I've seen enough footage, essays, and long-form videos about the awesome things those narratives do to be really excited at the prospect of a modern RPG created by them. If the Outer Worlds can marry the atmosphere of later-day Fallout games with the narrative design of the earlier entries, all updated with satisfying gameplay mechanics, then it's gonna be one hell of a ride when it comes out this October. Now that I've had an extended look at Link's Awakening, I've totally fallen head over heels in love with the game's art style. I love that Nintendo are letting their development teams unleash their creativity when it comes to how some of their games look, like the heavy stylized style of Breath of the Wild, or the last two Yoshi games going for wool and papercraft worlds. Link's Awakening looks like a diorama model that has sprung to life, and I am totally here for it. It gives the game a truly distinct feel and speaks to the seemingly boundless creativity that exists at Nintendo. The game looks good too. Owing to the fact that I've never owned a Nintendo handheld and that I was 7 when the game first came out, the original Link's Awakening totally passed me by. I've heard that people really love it though. As with Trials of Mana, an entry from earlier on this list, I'm excited that I'm getting the opportunity to experience this game for the first time in an updated form. One reveal that stuck out to me during E3 are the chamber dungeons. A lightweight dungeon editor crafted from chambers you collect as you play the game. While it's not going to be as robust as, say, Mario Maker, I am excited about the possibility of getting to play through some semi-random Zelda dungeons, and hope that the mod takes off so we can get a Zelda Maker in the future. It was probably a given that Control would land somewhere on this list. I'm a self-confessed mega fan of developer Remedy Entertainment. I enjoy Quantum Break, I loved Alan Wake, and I'm a big fan of the first two Max Payne games. Basically, I've loved everything they've made, give or take a Crossfire, which I've never played. So just seeing the reveal for Control last year and knowing their game was coming was enough to hype me up. And this year at E3 the gloves came off and we got to see the game in action for the first time, and I was left suitably and perhaps predictably impressed by what Remedy showed. The gameplay looks like pure Remedy. Third person, over the shoulder, and definitely the next evolutionary step from Quantum Break. Protagonist Jessie seems like she has access to some pretty sweet supernatural powers, such as a satisfying looking telekinesis she can use to throw objects at enemies, as well as a handgun that can be used as a typical pistol or shotgun, and probably more, but those were the two configurations I saw during a gameplay demo. The world itself looks mind-bendingly gripping, and is a place I can't wait to dig into and explore, turning it over for all the fascinating lore I'm sure Remedy is hidden all over it. Luckily, I don't have long to wait before I can start picking the game apart, as Control is dropping in August 27th. And if it seems like you've heard me say August a lot in this video, that's because I have. August is going to be a bit nuts for new game releases in 2019. Like I said in my pre-E3 wishlist entry for Animal Crossing's maiden voyage on Switch, I've never played a game in the series, instead cutting my teeth on games that have drawn inspiration from it, such as Stardew Valley and My Time at Portia. I knew enough to know that I'll probably love Animal Crossing New Horizons, and the reveal and subsequent gameplay deep dive at the Nintendo Treehouse pretty much confirmed what I said in my last video, that I couldn't wait to be in debt to Tom Nook for the first time. Interestingly, at least from my thoroughly uninformed perspective, this doesn't quite look like it'll be just another Animal Crossing game, which I would have been totally fine with, by the by. In fact, it looks like it might actually be even cooler than that. Instead of being the new arrival in town and integrating yourself into the population, this time you're jetting off to a deserted island and building up a community from scratch. One of the things I love about games like Stardew Valley is that they give me a glimpse into a life I'd really love to live, and damn if I wouldn't love to pitch up in a beachfront property on a deserted island and slowly help build up a community, taking evening strolls on the beach and generally living a relaxing existence among some excellent neighbours. While I was a little disappointed to see the game move to the increasingly crowded March of next year, I'm sure I'll find enough to keep me occupied until then, dreaming dreams of living a more peaceful life. Super Mario Maker 2 is out in just over a week, and it's fair to say I was already hyped for it before going into E3. The first one was easily one of my favourite games on the Wii U, a poor console with an impressive library of games, and I'm very eager to devour the levels of an expanded base of creators. But this isn't my list of most anticipated games of the year. I've done that list and I'll be updating it in a couple of weeks. This is a list of games that impressed me at E3. So let me tell you why Mario Maker is near the top of that list. For starters, Nintendo have heard the feedback loud and clear and are patching in the ability to play with friends post-launch, fixing one of their big oversights. Beyond that, the 90-ish minutes gameplay they showed at the Treehouse, longer than all the press conferences FYI, showed off a lot of really cool features, such as some of the 100 levels the game will come with, created by Mario's level designers, and they look really cool. I was especially drawn to the variable win conditions, such as one level where players had to finish without jumping. The game will also feature a toolbox available for players who are having a tough time getting through a level, giving them the ability to add blocks or items to make things a little easier on themselves. It's neat touches like this, showed off during the extended E3 gameplay, that has me excited for the game's launch next Friday. Despite the fact that a lot of the broad detail of Watch Dogs Legion leaked ahead of Ubisoft's E3 press conference, along with everything else they showed, I was still very pleasantly surprised by Watch Dogs Legion. A lot of that probably had to do with Helen, the pensioner turned hacker with a facehugger robot and breakout star of the demo. But as I sat and considered the core mechanic of the game, the ability to find and recruit your DedSec squad from any NPC in the game, it kind of blew my mind. I'm sure there'll be limitations to how it all works in terms of animation, voice acting, quest lines and whatnot, but even taking those into account, it's still both incredibly impressive and endlessly fascinating to see how it'll all work together. I will admit though, it was a bit weird seeing the game present a dystopian post-Brexit London as its main setting, and I'm not 100% certain of Ubisoft's ability to nail its narrative in the face of its stance on their games being apolitical and how they've treated similar subject matters in the game's past. But I can't deny how good the game actually looks. Building up my own personalised team of hackers to fight back against an oppressive surveillance regime looks like it's going to be a cool experience, and I can't wait to get attached to my favourite squad mates only to watch them die by my own stupidity when the game comes out early next year. I didn't get into Hollow Knight very quickly. I loved the look of the game, but when I was given a review code for it, I was knee-deep in Horizon Zero Dawn, so I passed it over to Russell to cover. He came back with a positive opinion, but I didn't sit down to play it until a 24-hour charity livestream much later in the year, when I was too sleep-deprived and really noticed just how good the game was. It was around another year before I actually sat down and give the game the time it deserved, and by then it was too late to wreck on my Game of the Year list to slot Hollow Knight into the top 10. But why am I telling you this story instead of talking about Hollow Knight follow-up Silksong? Because I'm about to tell you that Silksong looks absolutely sublime, and if you don't already have both eyes on it, I don't want you to make the same mistake I made with its predecessor and sleep on it. There are some differences to be seen in the gameplay revealed at E3. You're climbing a tower instead of descending the depths, and new protagonist Hornet has a slightly different style of play to her, but all the hallmarks of what made Hollow Knight a tremendous game are still front and centre, and I'm eagerly looking forward to the day I can sit down, play it, and do it the justice I wish I had given the first game. If it wasn't for my nostalgia for a certain Square Enix RPG that I'll get to in a moment, Fall Guys would absolutely be my favourite game of E3 2019. As I said on the podcast when I gave it my Best Indie Game Award, it's a game I never knew I desperately needed in my life until I saw the trailer of the Devolver Digital presentation. That trailer alone for me ranks as one of the best put together trailers for a non-Breath of the Wild sequel I've seen in a long time. It was just over 90 seconds long, but by the end of it I knew everything I needed to know about what Fall Guys is and why I need to play it as soon as possible. It takes the concept of Battle Royale and makes it accessible, fun, and completely unreliant on whether you can hide in a bathtub or shoot all the people. 100 players enter into a series of chaotic minigames that look absurdly entertaining to play through, getting eliminated in groups until the final ascent up the bonkers-looking Boulder Mountain to be the first to grab the crown at the top. Mediatonic showed a few of the game modes that will be available with the game. My favourite was a round that saw some players with tails pinned to their backs to avoid having them stolen by other players who didn't, all around a beautifully colourful obstacle course, complete with swinging hammers that could knock them for 6. It doesn't come out until 2020, but I think it already might be my favourite Battle Royale of all time. I'm not really sure what more there possibly is to say about Final Fantasy VII that I haven't already said in the 22 years since the original blew my tiny mind and became my favourite game of all time, except to say that in giving us our first deep dive into the game, Square Enix has won me over. I've talked before in the years since FF7's shock reveal about how I wasn't overly keen on an action-focused game with a similar combat style to Final Fantasy XV, preferring instead if Square preserved the original gameplay or simply moves on to making number 16. In the first 20 minutes of their press conference, Square Enix turned me into a believer. Sure, I'm not thrilled about the episodic nature of its release, or the potentially long time between installments from a studio that has a terrible track record for efficient development time, or the fact that this first episode will be set entirely in Midgar. But those are concerns for future Amy when she sits down to actually play the game next March. For right now, Final Fantasy VII easily had the best showing at E3 this year, And the changes they've made to the combat and graphics got me hyped in a way I haven't been since my reaction to the initial reveal in 2015, which sadly was not recorded, as it was a long time before I started streaming. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you've enjoyed it, please leave us a comment, like, or subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We've got tons of awesome videos coming every week, including review impressions, indie game of the week, debate-driven top 5 lists, video essays, and our weekly podcast where we discuss games, gaming culture, and the games industry. We also stream 3 times a week at twitch.tv/wordsaboutgames. But most importantly, have a fantastic day.